what I'd like to talk about today is linking all those wonderful intermediate marketing measures to cash flow. These types of measures, awareness, availability, choice, we've talked about several times. They are what we call intermediate marketing outcomes or intermediate marketing measures. They're kind of process measures. They're a way to get us from one point to another point, a way to get the customer to move from having no idea about who we are, what we sell, to actually making a purchase. But ultimately, we need to link these things to cash flow. And this is often where marketing falls short in organizations, is they get as far as awareness. They know that's important. They get as far as distribution. Yeah, we've got to get the product to people. And even get the choice, product we hope is better than our competitors. But then getting those things to financial outcomes becomes an issue. Often what happens is, we focus on the things that influence marketing metric. So, for example, for awareness, this might be, well, we're going to do some advertising. We've got a website. So we might, here this might be, we might measure GRPs. And for the website, it may be the number of hits. This might be sales calls. These are all activities that may ultimately influence awareness. And I may spend on these things. So I've got an expenditure. But now the question becomes, okay, you raised awareness. What does that do for my bottom line? Or with distribution, all kinds of marketing activities that we use to influence distribution. So these may be trade promotions of one type or another. That could be paying a retailer to put an end cap or in-store signage. It could be cooperative advertising, where I pay the retailer to advertise my product as part of their more general advertising. It could even be training of the retail sales force with respect to my specific product. These all influence availability. Again, there's an activity, I'm spending money, I've got to measure availability, how many people can get the product, but I still have the question of, okay, now what does that do for my bottom line? And again, for choice, these are, again, a bunch of activities, R&D, cost reduction, product improvement or enhancement. Again, I've got a lot of activities, all of which I hope will influence choice. I can measure choice. But now I've got a CFO who comes to me and says, that's great, you're building awareness. It only cost us $10 million last year. What did we get for it? And if you simply say, we got 80% awareness in the market, the CFO is going to basically say, so what? What does it do for our bottom line? Are we getting any return on that $10 million? Sometimes it's obvious. Most of the time, it's not. So there's this need to link our activities and link those intermediate metrics to financial performance. And this brings us back to the basic notion of demand and a baseline, actually. How much would we sell and at what price if we did no marketing at all? Now, if it's a really new product, a new-to-the-world product, the answer is probably nothing. Because nobody goes around and finds products they don't know about. But for many products, they've been in the market for a while, so the question, quite legitimately, and I've heard CFOs ask this, is, why do we keep marketing? So if you did no marketing, what would happen? By the way, in most cases, what happens is if you cut marketing, you get a very gradual decline in sales. In fact, what happens is that before the decline in sales, you tend to get a decline in awareness. There are firms that are quite deliberate in answering this question. They'll go into a market like Fresno, Fresno is a very common test market for reasons I won't get into here, but it's commonly used as a test market. And what they'll do is they'll pull all the marketing activity, and they'll watch sales or watch awareness, whatever they're interested in, and see what, and then maybe a week later they may pull all their marketing nationally. And then they watch what happens in Fresno, and as soon as there is a downturn in Fresno, they return to marketing, not only in Fresno, but nationwide. But it's a way for them to determine what happens if we don't market, and really begin to calibrate that. That's the, yeah.
Does the incremental value of marketing depreciate as you move forward or further into the life cycle of a brand or product?
It depends on the competitive intensity. I mean, it really, there are markets that are extraordinarily competitive, and then marketing continues to be really, really important. There are other markets where all the competitors seem to be willing to coexist in peace, and in that case, all the competitors are able to reduce their marketing expenditures. It is certainly the case when you get to a mature product that you don't need to spend nearly as much as during growth, because in growth you're doing things like creating awareness. Well, once I've got 90% awareness, the next 10% is going to be really expensive to get, and I can just remind people I don't need to spend as much as I was spending to make them aware in the first place. Same is true with distribution. If I've got 80% coverage in distribution, then yeah, I still have to maintain that, but I don't actually have to go and buy it in the first instance. Getting distribution in the first case is often very expensive. So the answer is, in general, as the product matures, we're able to spend less on marketing, but there are exceptions. But anyway, oops, didn't mean to go there yet. The extreme example is to stop marketing. More often than not, what a firm will do is to simply say, wonder how much we could decrease our budget, and then see what happens. So if we were to decrease the frequency of our advertising from 500 GRPs this week to 400 GRPs, and there's a cost difference there, then what would happen? Would anything happen? And again, I could do this nationwide, but I might choose to do it selectively in a market as a way of managing risk. But I get some sense of what happens. Or I might ask what would happen, conversely, if I were to increase my marketing budget. Do I get more sales? Do I get enough sales revenue to offset the additional cost of the advertising? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. And then the really tricky, difficult decisions revolve around, suppose I take my budget and I simply reallocate it. So instead of spending it all on television advertising, I take half of it and put it into digital, which, by the way, is what happened generally in the last 10 years. Does it make a difference in sales? What kind of difference does it make? And does that difference really pay out? By the way, Procter & Gamble just decided that they were spending too much on digital advertising. They cut their digital advertising by $200 million. They basically decided that getting likes doesn't help much. But they did get likes. It's a problem. That measure doesn't do anything for them. So the question becomes, what do you need to know in order to answer these questions? And this is where we get into techniques for trying to estimate the cash flow, and the return on investment in marketing. So we need to know something about what revenue we're generating. We're going to need to know something about the cost of whatever the marketing programs may be. And we're going to have some way of relating those costs to in-market effects. And that usually means it's hard to go directly from expenditures on marketing directly to revenue or cash flow. It usually has to go through some of these intermediate measures. But this is why baseline really becomes important, because to answer a lot of those questions, I kind of have to know what sales would be if I didn't market. Or if I'm going to increase my marketing program, what are my sales now? So did I actually get an increase relative to what I was selling before I engaged in the marketing? So for really total sales, minus the sales that are attributable to marketing. I can do that in an absolute sense. It could be all marketing, or it could be an individual marketing program where I'm looking at the incremental increase. So how do you determine baseline? We've talked about a couple of examples already. I can stop marketing altogether, or some part of marketing, and see what happens. By the way, small businesses often do this. They just go dark for a week, see what happens. You can use test markets, Fresno, for example. Let's do something in that market. Stop advertising, change our advertising, decrease our advertising, and see what happens. And that has the advantage of isolating the effect. And if it's a poor effect, then I won't do it again. If it's a positive effect, then maybe I repeat it in action. There are also some firms that offer what are called simulated test markets. These are really very sophisticated surveys. So rather than going into a whole big market like Fresno, what they will do is recruit customers to participate in a survey. But the survey actually involves setting up what appears to be a store. And so people will come in and they may be exposed to some advertising, or they may be given a coupon, they may be given a sample, some type of marketing activity. And then they'll be asked, now we'd like you to go shopping. We go to the store and we see what they buy. And by the way, we might follow up in a few weeks, follow them up and ask what you'd like to buy again. So it gives an indication of repeat purchase. But we can try out a whole variety of things in a simple way. One advantage of this is your competitors don't know that you're doing that. If I go into Fresno and change my marketing program, I assure you that by tomorrow, all my competitors will know what I'm doing. Because competitors watch one another like hawks. I can do some experimentation. It's interesting, the Nobel Prize was awarded to some economists. You know what their contribution was? I'm going to oversimplify, but it was basically introducing A/B testing to economics. A/B testing is simply comparing two alternatives. And so, if I'm in the simplest A/B testing is I can do something versus nothing. Something is A, nothing is B, and I can compare the result. We can do a lot of A/B testing really easily on the internet, on websites, with internet advertising. It's really inexpensive and very rapid to make changes and see what happens. And then there's some very sophisticated statistical tools that you will hear referred to as market mix modeling. This involves using lots of historical data and attempting to tease out the effects of different types of marketing programs. And we teach a whole course in marketing mix modeling. I just want you to know what it is. It's simply a way of teasing out the effects of marketing activities. This is a simple example of what a marketing mix model would look like. It's a regression equation. Okay. So I could estimate unit sales as some function of purchase intention and stop there. By the way, what's the alpha there? It's baseline. That's baseline. Okay. So it actually finds its way into the statistics. Yep.
On the final, will formulas be on there this time? Is that what you said?
I don't think I'm going to have you do any computation. I won't say there will not be a formula, but I'll give you the formula.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, you've got enough to remember, right? You can look up formulas, and I'm not a big fan of grinding through formulas. As I think I told you the first day of class, this class is an experiment. I've got a dozen colleagues around the country, actually around the world, teaching a similar class, but we're all doing it in different ways. One of my colleagues is doing it by problem sets. It's not working very well, but he's having people grind through lots of problem sets. I would rather you have the conceptual understanding, because you've got the conceptual understanding. You can find the formula. You can find a statistician to help you. When I talk with people who work in marketing analytics, they complain bitterly that they can't find good people. By the way, these are people who hire PhD statisticians. But what they complain about is that they don't know how to ask a business question. They know how to run numbers. They know how to do statistics. And if you can set up the problem for them, they can solve the problem. Well, to me, you need to be able to do that. But the first thing you've got to be able to do is to frame a business question, such as, if we spend 10% more on advertising in the Los Angeles media market, what will we get for that? That's the business question. And by the way, that's of interest to the CFO, the CEO, the board. I mean, here's another example. We might decide that in addition to estimating unit sales using purchase intention, that we might also want to estimate purchase intention using information about our marketing program. So I measure purchase intention, and then I ask, what's the relationship to the GRPs I buy in advertising, my broadcast advertising? What's the relationship to the number of web impressions? Number of times people go to my website, see what I have to say. And what's the relationship to price relative to my competitor's price? So now what I can do is I can plug in my marketing values, which are pretty readily available. I know how many GRPs I bought. I can measure how many people came to my website. I can look at it's easy to figure out what my relative price is. I can see what that does to purchase intention. And then I can plug purchase intention into the prediction of unit sales. That's market mix model. Now it can get very sophisticated because people will start doing things like putting different geographies in. Because Los Angeles, believe it or not, doesn't respond the same way that Dallas, Texas responds to a lot of marketing activities. So it becomes important to look at the geographic differences. There are lots of other marketing activities you could look at. But that's what it's all about. And again, there's this statistical term, alpha, that really represents the baseline. That's what would have happened if none of this other stuff had happened. The key issue in doing this type of analysis is to get the timing right. It's not when I pay for advertising. It's when people see the advertising that influences sales. And this is one reason why accounting data, and I love my accounting friends, why accounting data is not very useful for looking at marketing decisions, because accountants tend to capture data when the money is spent. But we may spend the money and the advertising may not show up for a month. So I need to know, when did the advertising actually hit? And that's what I'm going to model. And in an earlier class, I talked about how folks who do analytics will tell you that 90% of the work is getting the data in the right form. A lot of that is about getting the timing right. When did the ad actually run? When did the promotion actually drop? Did the retailer that I'm giving trade promotion to for signage actually put the signs out? When did they put them out? Where did they put them? One question that you might ask is, why even bother with purchase intention at all here? Why not just try to go from these marketing activities to some sort of estimate of sales volume? Again, it's a timing issue. No matter how good I am as a marketer, in most cases, my marketing program is not going to cause people to immediately jump up out of their chair and go buy something. Sometimes, but not most of the time. So, I can, a lot of my marketing activity is going to act on these intermediate factors like awareness, like purchase intention, and then at some point when the individual is ready to buy, they will go purchase. But I'll be misled if I just try to go from these marketing activities to directly to sales volume. Because there's stuff happening in people's heads that I need to take account of. There's timing in people's purchase decisions that I need to take into account. By the way, there's a reason why this is GRPs and not advertising dollars. There's a reason why this is web impressions and not how much I spend on digital. Because dollars are a very coarse measure of marketing activity. You really want to know, what did you buy? I could spend $5 million on advertising, and that would get me one Super Bowl spot. Or I could spend $5 million and probably get a couple of ads a week in prime time or the fall season. It's what I'm buying that's really important. Yeah, there's a cost. I need to take the cost into account, but I need to measure kind of what the impact is, not so much just the absolute cost. You will see studies that will show you that spending more on advertising does increase sales volume. It does. But that's an awfully coarse analysis. Because it doesn't really tell you it's the right amount you're spending. Anheuser-Busch, a number of years ago, actually asked the question, are we spending the right amount on advertising? And what they discovered after a lot of analysis is they were spending too much. In fact, they cut their advertising budget 25% and didn't have any effect on sales at all. They were over-advertising. And you don't want to do that. And just as with the life cycle, as the market matures, marketing becomes less of a factor. The market is less sensitive to it, at least in the short term. The same is true with a lot of marketing programs. There's a point of diminishing returns for advertising. And once I reach that point, doing any more advertising doesn't buy anything. but it does cost me. And so a lot of the marketing mix stuff that we talk about really is designed to try to get that. Another term you will hear in addition to marketing mix modeling is attribution. If you go down the hill and talk to all the digital companies down there, they don't talk about marketing mix modeling, they talk about attribution. By the way, it's the same thing. What they mean by attribution is, can we attribute, that's where attribute comes from, can we attribute some outcome, sales, revenue, whatever, to a particular marketing activity? Why they use attribution rather than marketing mix model, I don't know. It's just part of their vocabulary. But if you hear that, no doubt some of you will interview with some of those companies, you'll hear the term attribution, you know what it is. So if we can complete this kind of modeling with historical data, then we actually have a very useful forecasting tool as well. Because now what I can do is, if I know these relationships, what I can do is I can say, I wonder what would happen if I increased GRPs by 10%. How would that change purchase intention and ultimately sales volume? Or if I lowered my price relative to my competitors, what would that do? So when I have one of these models, I can play all kinds of really interesting what-if games. If I did this, what would happen? If I did that, what would happen? The only problem is that they tend to be bound by the data. So on a lot of the analyses we do of frequently purchased consumer purchased goods, price doesn't show up as particularly important. And that's because there aren't really much in the way of price differences in a lot of categories. But raise your price 50%, I'm sure your price will show up as important. In thinking about KPIs, you will need to think about which ones are most relevant for what your job is and what your decisions are. There's no best set of key performance indicators that will be useful to everybody in the company. The CFO wants to look at return on investment. As an assistant brand manager, that may be less important to you than things like awareness, availability, choice, and so forth. But there is a linkage. There is what we call a set of cascading outcomes. So, yeah, cash flow is what we ultimately are interested in the business. Jack Welch, who was this very successful CEO at General Electric for 2 decades, said if he could manage the company with 3 measures, it would be cash flow, customer satisfaction, and employee satisfaction. So cash flow is really important. If you read almost any CEO's letter in an annual report, cash flow is going to be in there. In fact, there'll be 2 things that they'll always talk about: cash flow and growth. But knowing cash flow isn't very helpful if I'm trying to influence it. It's really a descriptor. So I need to know some other things. Cash flow grows out of costs. It grows out of revenue. So that's great. I can measure those. But then, how do I influence those? Well, cost is related in part to my margins. The margins I can get often are influenced by how satisfied people are, how brand loyal they are. Really successful brands are typically measured in terms of people will pay a premium for them. And then there's a whole issue of awareness that helps build the brand. Similarly, on the sales side, there's velocity. How much am I selling at any one given time? And that's a function of people's purchase intentions, their willingness to recommend to others, And again, they also related to things like awareness and knowledge. So you've got a whole set of measures that kind of cascade, and they ultimately get us to cash flow. Part of your challenge as a marketer will be to help others in the organization understand the relationships. This is a good example of how measures often work together. This is data on a set of 1,000+ television commercials. And we have 3 measures. Well, actually 4 measures. One of the measures is whether it's a new or mature product. And we've done a simple little analysis here. We have a measure of recall. Do people actually remember the advertising? And the way we get that measure is to call people up 24 hours after they've seen the ad. We can monitor this on your cable television. And we can determine when people recall. And then we can figure out whether the ad is above average or below average in terms of recall. We can also measure what they actually remember. Do they comprehend the message? And again, do this above or below average. And then here's a message factor. Does it say anything about the brand that is different from other brands? We call this a brand differentiating message. There's basically a reason to purchase. And then we can look at whether it's new versus old product. What you'll see is that if we have an ad that gets above average recall, above average comprehension, has a brand differentiating message, and is new, about 77% of people who see the ad actually switch to the advertised product. Now, let's look at the other end. Below average recall, below average comprehension, no reason to purchase, and a mature product. Only about 20% will switch. But notice how we're putting the data together to arrive at a final result. And by the way, that switching data I can now turn into market share. How many people switch to my product based on that ad? Ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here is what's the incremental value of the marketing I'm doing, incremental value of what I'm spending on a promotion relative to what it costs me to do that promotion. And people will refer to this as marketing return on investment. You will hear people talk about marketing return on investment. They use this term in all kinds of ways that don't necessarily imply dollars. What kind of return on marketing investment did you get? We build awareness by 10%. Yeah. The CFO is not going to find that very compelling. The CFO wants to know is, okay, fine, you've got 10% increase in awareness. How does that translate into dollar sales? And then what's the relative return on the investment to build that awareness? Well, we spent $5 million, and with 10% additional awareness, we generated $3 million more in sales. Oh, thank you. You just lost $2 million. This is not really easy to do, and it's why more firms don't do it. It's difficult because we do a lot of things in marketing. It's often difficult to separate the effects. Why experimentation is helpful. There's timing issues that we talked about. And there's the whole issue of return is partly a function of baseline. If I have no sales, I probably get an effect from advertising with the first dollar I spend. If I'm already selling millions of units, probably the next dollar of that, and spending a lot of money on advertising, probably the next dollar of advertising isn't going to have much effect. So I really need to kind of understand where I am in the marketplace relative to the baseline. With advertising in particular, but most marketing programs, we will find that the market responds in one of two ways to additional marketing activity. One is this way. Incremental sales go up directly as we do more marketing, except we do get it to a point of diminishing returns. You usually find this in markets that are new and where there are no competitors. More commonly in established markets, what we get is an S-shaped function. There's not much effect to the initial spending, then you get a lot of effect, and then again diminishing returns. The reason for this initial effect here, or lack of effect, is because in the face of competitors, there's a lot of clutter out there, and you have to do enough to break through. And so you'll hear people in the advertising business talk about breakthrough advertising. Really, what they really mean is that they've managed to get people's attention. Could be by virtue of the message, could be by virtue of just spending a lot. Here's a simple calculation. It's actually in your textbook. I'm not going to take time to go through it, but you can obtain information that would tell you if I increase brand awareness by 1%, how much will unit volume increase by? Well, in my example here, it's 5%. Well, if I know that, then I can do a whole variety of other computations that actually let me get to return on investment for increasing brand awareness. Here's a conceptual way of thinking about this. Here's a set of marketing activities. Could be advertising, sales promotion, sales calls, producing some kind of intermediate outcome, awareness, availability, store visits, whatever it is. Hopefully, if it's working, that'll have an influence on things like market share. It may have an influence on price. It may have an influence on distribution coverage. And if I know those things, and I know the size of the market, category volume, then I can get some sense of category volume times market share, the number of sales, the velocity, how much I'm selling at any one point in time. Multiply that times the margin, and I actually get cash flow. And by the way, if I look at cash flows out over a long period of time, that's the value of a brand. Again, I won't take you through that example, but here's something with numbers that are put in. We have a $2 million ad campaign. $2 million ad campaign results in a 10% increase in purchase intention. Well, that's great. Well, what does that do for me? Just having people wandering around with high purchase intention in their head doesn't help it. Okay. Well, how does purchase intention, a 10% purchase intention, actually influence market share? Well, I've gone and I've collected data. Data may tell me that a 10% increase in purchase intention actually results in an 8% increase in market share. And then, if I know how much distribution coverage I have, if I know what my price is, if I know what my margin is, then that incremental market share times the category volume gives me the incremental volume, times my margin, that's the incremental cash flow. So in my example here, my ad campaign, which increased purchase intention, which increased market share, created $20 million in incremental cash flow for $2 million. I'll do that all day. I mean, that's a good investment. But the key here is to think about some very simple characteristics of the market. Over here. Market share, we monitor market share all the time in most markets. Distribution coverage. Distribution coverage is simply what part of the market can easily get your product. Now, it's not quite so simple as what percentage of stores we're in. I could be in 90% of stores and have 95% of the market covered. Because some of the stores have higher volume than others. Or I could be in 50% of the stores and cover 70% of the market. Almost no one has 100% coverage. It's very expensive to get that last little bit of coverage. But I need to know this. And it's a little more complicated with distribution because distribution coverage also can be looked at from the standpoint of not only what percentage of stores am I in, but how much shelf space do I have in each store. Generally, we find if we have more shelf space, we get more sales. By the way, some marketing programs are specifically targeted at getting more shelf space. Retailers are in the real estate business. And as soon as you understand that, you understand completely why retailers behave the way they do. Retailers have shelf space. And they figure out what to put on those shelves. And they're very sophisticated about putting the best combination of things on their shelf. Which is why when you come in and say, I've got a new product, I'd like to put it on your shelf, they typically say, why? Show me that it's going to sell better than something I'm going to have to replace. Or what they may say is, be delighted to do that. We will charge you $100,000 a month to put one shelf facing in place. So you can buy the shelf space. So they'll take some product that doesn't make a lot for them and replace it because you're buying the real estate. You'll hear something called a listing fee. A listing fee simply means you're paying a retailer for the privilege of having your product on their shelf. Frito-Lay spends $500 million a year getting shelf space. By the way, that's also what they spend on advertising. But we know the advertising, it's visible. We don't see, we see the shelf racks, but we don't see the expenditure that's going into that to get that shelf space. So there may be marketing programs that are specifically targeted at trying to increase this. But it's very measurable. There may be programs that are specifically intended to deal with price. Some of them are temporary. So a price promotion, a coupon, a rebate. Those are all reductions in price. The question then becomes one of, if I take a reduction in price, what's it going to do ultimately to my cash flow? What's it going to do to my margin and ultimately my cash flow? Sometimes I can operate here on the category. How big's the category? Can I get people to buy more of the product? Can I get people to use it more often? And there are a variety of marketing campaigns that's their purpose. Got milk? They're not selling a brand. What they're trying to do is get you to drink more milk. make the category bigger. As you can see, there's just a relatively small number of metrics that we need in order to estimate cash flow. But I do need them. I need to know what my price is. Actually, the more useful thing is the relative price compared to competitors. Obviously, I need to know what that's going to do to my margin. I need to understand market share. I need to understand category volume and distribution coverage. If I know those things, I can get the financials. Now the key is to link the marketing activity and those intermediate activities like awareness, availability, choice, to the financial side of things. But if you can do that, you can just explain to a manager how to do that. You will have a real advantage when you interview. It's remarkable how many marketing students graduate and they don't know how to do this. So a couple of things to talk about, and we'll stop for the day. You know, baseline is really kind of a vexing concept. It's kind of hard to get at. When we talked a little bit about it, but why is the notion of a baseline so difficult for people to understand? It's kind of invisible. Because we're kind of asking, what would sales be if something did or did not happen that's not happening now? People tend to think about sales, not sales in the context of what's driving it. And baseline is all about, you know, what would sales be if we didn't do anything? And at the silly level, a really new product, everybody gets it. Baseline 0. We've got to do something to get sales. But if you're a $50 million product in grocery stores, the idea that, well, you know, maybe 40 million of that would still occur if we didn't advertise next year. So what's the value of my advertising? It's not 50 million. It's really the difference between 50 million and 40 million. So it's $10 million in sales, it's a lot of sales. But I probably wouldn't want to spend $10 million on an advertising campaign to get